Welcome to today's webinar, Municipal Housing Policy and Program Ideas from New Westminster. My name is Alison Homer. I'm the manager of Western Cities for Tamarac's Vibrant Communities, Cities Reducing Poverty Network. Before we get started with the webinar, I wanted to run us through a few technical considerations. If you can see this slide, press the hand button in the GoToWebinar control panel. This will raise your hand. Let me know that you can see the visuals. Great. You have a couple of audio options to connect to this webinar. You can either connect through your computer speakers. There's an audio tab on the control panel. If you select computer, you'll hear us that way. You can also switch to a phone call by using the phone number on the screen. Enter the access code that's also shown on the screen, and it'll give you a unique audio PIN. That'll let you see the visuals through your computer, but connect to audio via the telephone. All attendees are now on mute, but you're welcome to connect with us through the questions box or the chat box to send us your questions that we will answer. Tristan will answer for us at the end of the webinar. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can also use that chat box to get in touch with us, and a staff member will assist you. Last, if you'd like to tweet as you learn during the webinar, you can use hashtag #PovertyReduction2018 and tag @VC_Canada. So we're going to begin the webinar. Please bear with me. I'll just repeat the introduction for the sake of the webinar recording. Welcome to today's webinar, Municipal Housing Policy and Program Ideas from New Westminster. My name is Alison Homer. I'm the manager of Western Cities for Tamarac's Vibrant Communities, Cities Reducing Poverty Network. I'm here to introduce our webinar today with Tristan Johnson. Tristan has been a planning analyst with the City of New Westminster since 2013. He has been involved in the research, development, implementation, analysis, and evaluation of many city policies and strategies, including the secured market rental housing policy, family-friendly housing policy, and poverty reduction strategy. Prior to joining the City of New Westminster, Tristan was involved in poverty reduction work as a practicum student at the Kingston Community Roundtable on Poverty Reduction, and as a researcher at the Social Planning and Research Council of British Columbia, Spark BC. Tristan holds a bachelor's degree in science and geography from Simon Fraser University and a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Queen's University. He is a registered professional planner with membership in both the Canadian Institute of Planners, CIP and Planning Institute of British Columbia, PIBC. He is a municipal member of the Metro Vancouver RPAC Housing Subcommittee. Tristan is a keen data, survey, and research enthusiast. Although he is interested in many different socioeconomic issues, his greatest interest is in the area of housing. Welcome, Tristan, and thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Allison, and welcome everyone on this Wednesday morning. So first of all, I'm going to give some context about New Westminster. First of all, New Westminster is a city within Metro Vancouver, the third most populated metro area in Canada. New Westminster is a mid-sized city of approximately 71,000 people. It has grown quickly in recent years, 7.6% population growth between 2011 and 2016. New Westminster also has a high percentage of renters. 43.9% of New Westminster's households rent. New Westminster also has the third largest purpose-built rental housing stock in the Metro Vancouver region. The City of New Westminster has generally had a socially involved and socially conscious city council historically, which continues to this day. New Westminster also faces many housing challenges which make housing a priority issue for the City Council and local residents. These issues include low rental vacancy rates. Vacancy rates in New Westminster have generally been very low over the past several decades. As of October 2017, the rental vacancy rate in New Westminster was 1.1%. Long social housing wait list. New Westminster also has a long social housing wait list. As of April 2018, there were 570 households on the BC housing wait list in New Westminster alone and 13,286 in Metro Vancouver as a whole. High spending on housing costs. This is also a problem in New Westminster. In 2016, 2 in 5 renter households spent 30% or more of their before tax household income on rental costs, rent, electricity, etc. In an even more dire situation are the 1 in 5 renter households that spend half or more of their income on rental costs. Homelessness. Homelessness is a challenge in almost all Canadian communities, and New Westminster is no exception. The 2017 Metro Vancouver homeless count in March 2017 found that New Westminster had 133 homeless residents. So New Westminster's approach to housing challenges. Although many housing items, provincial and federal legislation, and housing funding are outside of municipal control, municipalities can still play a role in tackling housing challenges in their community. Here is how New Westminster approached housing challenges. New Westminster uses a mix of carrots and sticks to influence the housing market. For example, offering incentives such as increased density and lowered parking standards for new market rental buildings versus new strata buildings is a carrot. On the other hand, our family-friendly housing policy, which mandates minimum percentages of new multifamily units that must have 2 bedrooms or 3+ bedrooms, is a stick. Partnerships and listening. Partnerships are also key for dealing with housing market challenges. These could include partnerships with BC Housing to fund projects such as modular housing, for example, or partnerships with local organizations to run housing support such as the Rent Bank. Listening to partners and the communities is also very important. Learning about people's struggles with rental evictions due to rent-evictions spurred the city's actions to mitigate the impact of rent-evictions. Resources. Cities can also bring resources to the table. These could include money, for example, to help fund the administrative costs for the rent bank, land for the Small Sites Affordable Housing Project, or other resources. Advocacy. Some areas of housing are outside of municipal control. These include provincial legislation, for example. The City of New Westminster has been very active in recommending changes related to tenants' rights, for example. 3 examples of how municipalities can make a difference. I believe these examples are doable for many municipalities if the political will is present. The examples are the Renovations Action Plan, Small Sites Affordable Housing Project, and the Rent Bank. First, I'll talk about rent-evictions. What is a rent-eviction? So according to the Pivot Legal Society, a rent-eviction is defined as the practice of exploiting a clause in the Residential Tenancy Act, which allows a landlord to evict their tenants under the premise of performing major renovations and then significantly increasing the rent on the unit or units. These evictions are done by landlords and property management companies typically. Why do they happen? Well, they happen because the rent increases in British Columbia for market rental units are tied to the household in a unit, not the unit itself. Therefore, if tenants are evicted for the renovation, new tenants can be brought in at a much higher rate of rent than could be charged to existing tenants. On the other hand, the rental housing stock is aging and is often in need of upgrade, so there's a bit of a balance there. So how common are rent-evictions? According to stats recorded by the City of New Westminster over the past 2 to 3 years, 12 buildings have been affected by rent-evictions, which has resulted in rent-evictions in 247 units. Rent-evictions, related housing challenges. Rent-evictions affect some of the housing challenges noted in the earlier part of this presentation in the following ways. Low rental vacancy rates. First of all, as rental vacancy rates are very low in New Westminster and the region as a whole, evicted renters can find it very difficult to find a new place to live. Second, high spending on housing costs. Furthermore, when the evicted tenants find a new place to live, the rents are often much higher than at their original building. Again, this is due to the tenancy laws discussed earlier, which allow landlords to charge whatever rent they want for new tenants, which is often much more than the allowable rent increases for existing tenants. This can result in housing affordability challenges. Homelessness. Although most rent-evicted tenants will not become homeless, there may be some tenants who are unable to find a new place and end up homeless either on the street, in a shelter, or couch surfing. So rent-evictions, barriers to stopping rent-evictions. The rent-evictions issue poses many challenges to municipalities hoping to address it. One issue is that cities lack the authority to stop rent-evictions, as tenancy law is a provincial jurisdiction. Exceptions include cases where the work is being done without a building permit, in which case the city can issue a stop work order. 2. Furthermore, tenants are often unaware of their rights and may end up receiving less compensation and notice for moves than they are entitled to by law. Third, another challenge is that tenants are often afraid to speak out and talk to the residential tenancy branch. They may be worried about being marked as a bad tenant if they speak out. In a tight rental market where there's a lot of competition to find units to rent, having good rental references is important. The City of New Westminster has used partnerships, listening, information, and advocacy to handle the renovictions crisis. Partnerships. The City of New Westminster brought in TRAC, the Tenant Resource and Advisory Center, to host workshops in 2016 about tenants' rights. The City of New Westminster also assisted MLA Judy Darcy, our local representative in provincial government, with hosting a TRAC workshop in 2017. Listening. The City of New Westminster also encourages tenants to contact the city to let them know if a renoviction is taking place. That way, the city can also know to follow up to see if the proper building permits are in place and to make sure that the tenants are aware of their rights. Information. TRAC produces tenant survival guides. Whenever there is evidence that a renoviction will take place soon, the City of New Westminster prints out copies of the Tenant Survival Guide, as well as information on updates to the Residential Tenancy Act, and mails out copies of this information to affected tenants. Advocacy. Although the City of New Westminster does not have the power or jurisdiction to change provincial legislation, the City can make requests to the Province of British Columbia to change legislation. The City of New Westminster submitted resolutions in 2016 and 2017 to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, asking the Province of British Columbia to change the rules around renovictions to better protect tenants. Since then, the Province of British Columbia has made some improvements to the Residential Tenancy Act, including requiring 4 months notice for tenants being renovicted instead of 2 months notice. Small sites affordable housing. We'll move on to this topic now. What is it? So the City of New Westminster requested proposals for innovative affordable ownership or rental housing projects for 2 city-owned sites. The city is aiming to maximize the use of civic land assets while developing a model for addressing the very pressing issue of housing affordability in Metro Vancouver. The 2 sites chosen were in Queensborough and in downtown. Both sites are small, i.e. less than 6,000 square feet, and they are city-owned land. Why? Given the small size of the sites, some of the site constraints, servicing, etc., and a relatively low potential yield of units, why do this project may be a valid question. Although the potential unit yields were projected to be small, in a region like Metro Vancouver, every single unit of affordable housing counts. Furthermore, as the City of New Westminster is a small, densely populated municipality, a lack of city-owned land constrained the use of larger lots for this project. Spearheaded by who? Well, City Council spearheaded this idea of creating affordable housing on small sites. So, the how-to process. First part was selecting the sites. One of the first steps was to go through the list of city-owned sites to find sites that could be used for this project. The next part was to use an RFP request in 2015 to ask for nonprofits and developers to submit their ideas for the development of affordable housing on these sites. Then, a comprehensive evaluation process by city staff and a consultant took place to choose proponents for both of the sites. I will first talk about the downtown site. So the downtown site, for this site, Catalyst Community Development Society, the developer, and the Community Living Housing Society, the manager-operator of the units, were selected as the successful proponents for this project. Catalyst is a nonprofit organization that helps other nonprofits to develop real estate, while the Community Living Housing Society is a subsidiary of the Community Living Society, a nonprofit which provides services to persons with developmental disabilities. In order to make the project work financially for the developer and manager-owner, the city basically gave the land to the developer but had to charge a nominal fee purchase price of $10. So the project will be a stacked townhome development with 6 units, 3 3-bedroom units and 3 1-bedroom units. More about this project. So the tenants. The tenants for the 3 1-bedroom units will be persons with developmental disabilities, while the tenants for the 3 3-bedroom units will be families with children. The project will have affordable rents. The rents for 1-bedroom unit tenants on income assistance will not exceed the shelter portion of income assistance, while the rents for 1-bedroom tenants with employment income will not exceed 30% of their total income. The rents for the 3-bedroom units will not exceed 30% of the incomes specified in the housing income limit in Metro Vancouver as specified by BC Housing. So the housing income limit rents are fairly comparable to existing older market rental stock, but are much, much cheaper than rents for newer rental stock. The terms and conditions of the use of this site are secured by a housing agreement on title. A housing agreement is a legal document that is used as a tool to enforce the terms and conditions of a site for rental housing. The terms of this housing agreement relate to the maximum incomes of tenants, maximum rents of tenants, management and operation of units must be managed and operated by a nonprofit with a housing-related mission, and other terms. And this project is currently under construction. So the Queensborough site. The developer and operator for the project on the Queensborough site will be WINGS, Women in Need Gaining Strength, a nonprofit that provides housing and services to women and children fleeing domestic violence. In this case, the financials worked for the developer to lease the land from the city. The leasing of the land from the city is preferable from the city's point of view to selling the land because the city retains greater ability to control the project if necessary. The land was leased from the city for $10 for a term of 60 years. There will be 5 two-bedroom townhome units in this project. The tenants. Tenants will be single mothers with children. The rents will be affordable. The rents for the mothers on income assistance will be the shelter portion of income assistance. The rents for the mothers with employment income will not exceed 30% of their income. Again, the terms and provisions of the housing are secured by a housing agreement on title. And this project is also currently under construction. So now I'm going to discuss the challenges addressed. First of all, this addresses the long social housing waitlist challenge. Although the number of combined units in both projects, 11 units total, is small, every bit counts for increasing the social housing supply and hopefully decreasing the length of the social housing waiting list. High spending on housing costs. With rents controlled by the housing agreement and being substantially below market rents, these units are much more affordable to their intended clients than market rental housing would be. What the city has done. The City of New Westminster has followed several of the approaches noted earlier in the presentation to help make this project a reality. Resources. The City of New Westminster lowered the cost of development by offering up land for a nominal fee as noted earlier. Partnerships. These two developments wouldn't be possible without the developers and nonprofits to come up with the vision for their projects, build the projects, and operate and manage the projects. BC Housing has also helped to provide funding to the nonprofits for development. Advocacy, lead by example. Since New Westminster offered up land for affordable housing, several neighboring municipalities have followed suit. In April 2016, the City of Burnaby also did an RFP process for 2 sites for the development of affordable housing. The City of Coquitlam has also offered up land for the development of affordable housing. So now I'll talk about the Rent Bank. So what is the Rent Bank? The New Westminster Rent Bank is a housing stabilization program geared towards low-income residents of New Westminster who are experiencing a temporary financial crisis. The New Westminster Rent Bank can offer a low-fee, short-term loan to low-income individuals and families that live in the City of New Westminster and are at risk of eviction or essential utility disconnection due to a temporary shortage of funds. How did it start? In February 2016, MLA Judy Darcy and her constituency assistant, Nadine Nakagawa, made a presentation on rent bank programs to the City of New Westminster's Mayor's Task Force on Housing Affordability. Then city staff conducted research into rent bank programs and the role that the city could play in supporting a rent bank. Then, in December 2016, the City of New Westminster issued an expression of interest for nonprofits to operate the rent bank. In April 2017, the Purpose Society of the Lower Mainland was selected to run the rent bank. The rent bank started up in June 2017. Who helped? The City of New Westminster provided $60,000 over 3 years, so $20,000 per year, to cover administrative costs. Local credit unions provided loan capital. Additional financial support was provided by the New Westminster Homelessness Coalition Society. Eligibility and terms. Loans are for low-income persons or families renting in New Westminster that are experiencing temporary financial crisis and are at risk of eviction. Loans can be used to pay utilities or rent and can be up to $1,000. A $1 a month administration fee is charged on loans. Loans need to be paid back within 2 years, 24 months. So results to date. As of June 30th, 2018, the New Westminster Rent Bank had processed 29 loans for a total amount of $23,463.67 over the first year. Rent Bank challenges addressed. The New Westminster Rent Bank addresses several challenges discussed earlier in today's presentation. Low rent of rental vacancy. If tenants are evicted, finding a new place in our low vacancy rental environment can be very difficult. By preventing eviction, tenants avoid the challenging new rental place search. High spending on housing costs. Again, as noted earlier, due to the residential tenancy laws, the cheapest place for most tenants to live is where they are living now. By preventing tenants from being evicted, tenants can stay in a more affordable place rather than move to a new place where the landlord can start the rents at a much higher level. Furthermore, rent bank loans are a much more affordable alternative to payday loans for covering housing expenses. Homelessness. Some of the rent bank loan applicants have multiple challenges, including physical health, mental health, and addictions challenges. If they are evicted, many of them would likely become homeless. The rent bank loans help prevent eviction and hence homelessness. What has the city done for the rent bank? So the city has used the following strategies to help the New Westminster Rent Bank. Resources. The city provided funding to cover administrative costs for the rent bank. City staff also conducted research on how to create a rent bank. The city also led the expression of interest process to help get the rent bank started. Partnerships. The City of New Westminster worked with MLA Judy Darcy and others to help find sources of loan capital. The City of New Westminster selected the Purpose Society of the Lower Mainland to run the rent bank. One City of New Westminster Planning Division staff member sits on the Rent Bank Loan Evaluation Committee as a member. Advocacy. The City of New Westminster continues to promote the New Westminster Rent Bank through presentations and links to their website. The City of New Westminster has encouraged neighboring jurisdictions to start rent bank programs and has provided advice to other communities looking to start rent banks. In the future, the City of New Westminster may consider advocating to the provincial government of British Columbia to fund all rent banks in British Columbia, as has been done in Ontario. I'm not sure if it's still done today. Hopefully it is, because it's a great program. So these are 3 of our programs, but we have some other programs on the horizon that may be of interest. First one is modular housing for the homeless. As part of the province of British Columbia's rapid response to homelessness, the City of New Westminster submitted an application to use city-owned land in Queensborough for modular housing for homeless women or women at risk of homelessness. In July 2018, this project was approved by City Council. When completed, this project will provide 44 units of supportive housing. Inclusionary housing or zoning. The City of New Westminster is considering requirements for developments achieving certain levels of density above and beyond allowed zoning to provide a certain percentage of units as affordable housing units. The city is working with a land economist to determine the feasibility of this approach. Rental replacement policy. The rental stock in New Westminster is aging, and some of the housing stock is reaching the end of its economic life, with the loss of thousands of older market rental units to demolition without replacement in some of our neighboring municipalities. The City of New Westminster is concerned about this loss spreading to New Westminster. The City of New Westminster has engaged a land economist to look at the feasibility of the replacement of rental units in demolished buildings with rental units in new buildings with some level of affordability requirements. So the main takeaways. Here are some of the main takeaway points from the City of New Westminster's involvement in housing. Municipalities do not have to have access to as large budgets. They do not have access to as large budgets as their provincial and federal counterparts. Therefore, projects that don't require a lot of money are important for cities. Projects like the Renovations Action Project that are mostly advocacy and information sessions can be doable on smaller budgets, while investments in rent banks can be scaled based on the size of the renter pool being served. Furthermore, even if municipalities don't have much money, land can be a valuable resource to help start housing projects. In order to understand the housing challenges in your local community and respond to these challenges, it is important to listen to your local community. Concerns from residents about rent evictions are what prompted the City of New Westminster to put together a Renovations Action Plan. Who are your partners? Cities are only one small part of the team that can help on housing issues. Partnering with the provincial and federal governments, example the Rapid Rehousing of Homeless Modular Housing Project, can help provide funding for various projects. Local nonprofits can help build and operate housing projects and rent banks. So thank you very much for listening to my long presentation, and I'll turn it back to Allison now.
Thank you so much, Tristan. I think you did a great job of setting the stage for the housing challenges that you face in US, and I'm sure many communities across Canada can also relate to that. It's really interesting to hear about some of the initiatives that you're involved with and the involvement of the city beyond funding. You mentioned the participation on roundtables, advocacy to higher levels of government, and I also really enjoyed your description of the partnerships and the way that you work together across sectors partners with your local nonprofits, credit unions, community at large, and so forth. So thank you so much for that. I'll also flag on the City of New Westminster website has a great affordable housing page, which also summarizes the programs that Tristan spoke to as part of the presentation, and we can send that out as part of the follow-up notes. So we did have some questions that were submitted in advance. I encourage you to also submit your live questions to the chat box, and we will do our best to get to them. We have another half an hour or so, so we do have quite a bit of time for questions. Tristan, before we started with the questions submitted in advance, Jill just sent in a quick clarifying one about the Queensborough site. She mentions the 2-bedroom units and says, how do they reconcile parents with more than one child if the children are not of the same sex?
That's interesting. I mean, that is certainly something that would be taken into consideration. I think the housing operator would take that into consideration. It would be, I mean, it would basically be up to the operator. As a city, we don't take a role in determining who should occupy the units to that detail. We just, would wanted it to be families with children for those particular units. So it would be up to the operator and their discretion about that.
Great, thanks. So moving on to the pre-event questions. So the first one, we had one come in. Question is, I'd be interested in hearing about how you define and frame affordability and stability with your municipal leaders, colleagues, and partners. Have you framed housing as a public health issue in your community, and has framing it as health held any traction?
Well, as per our city website, so affordable housing is defined as home ownership and rental housing for low to moderate income households costing less than 30% of their gross income. We don't have as clear a definition on housing stability, but we generally think of housing stability as people being able to stay in their existing housing and not having to move around many times. In regards to housing affordability, there are a lot of different issues around it in Metro Vancouver. They range from concerns about homelessness to social housing to upper income households not being able to afford to buy a detached home. So it's kind of all over the place, and it's challenging to focus on one part because what affordable housing means varies from person to person. Housing is such a big issue on its own in Metro Vancouver. I think almost all the polls pre-municipal elections in the region have shown that housing is like the biggest issue. So it's kind of bigger than a public health issue. Public health is important, of course, but because housing is so much more prominent than public health in our region, framing it as public health in New Westminster wouldn't bring as much attention to it. However, for homelessness, framing it as public health has been important, I think, in the past, for the homelessness issue in particular.
Great. In terms of, I like the conversation on affordability and stability as well, and how you mentioned in your presentation the importance of retaining housing with costs going up. Consistently, if somebody does lose their housing, then they're unlikely to find something of the same at the same rent. So very important for that stability. The next question we had was, what was the process you used to develop policies and strategies for the city? Did you use community or city staff to drive this change?
Well, there are many different processes. Some, like renovations, are driven by community concerns and complaints about various issues. Our city council drives a lot of the change because they are the ones who can direct staff to act or create policy. So again, political will is really important. As staff, we work as we are directed to work. We also can research issues and provide recommendations as well. So there's many steps involved in housing policy creation. I'll give the example of our family-friendly housing policy, which we developed during 2014 and 2015 and implemented for January 1st, 2016. So this policy mandates that a minimum percentage of units in new multifamily developments have to have 2 or 3 bedrooms. So this process included the use of consultants for economic modeling for policy impacts, community consultation through an open house and surveys, council reports to get feedback from council, background research by staff. We did a lot of that. I looked at 68 different municipalities, not just in Canada, but across the world, and read lots of research articles. So, make sure we get it right on what was being done in our region and other areas on this topic. And we also held a consultation with the local development industry, UDI. So I think all those steps are very important. It's important to get the numbers right, to kind of know what you're getting into, to know what the community thinks, and also to know how it would affect the development industry, because we need the development industry to build these housing units, and it needs to be workable for them as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I know from working with you, environment community is just the work that you do with every project that you have, and all that background work of looking at what's happening across the country, what are some promising practices, how you could apply that to the New West context. I think that's always, and I know you use that regularly in the way that you work. Okay, next question. And I'll do one more question that was asked in advance, and then we'll jump. I see there's a couple popping up in the chat box as well.
Sure.
So this third one that was asked ahead of time, what are some of the most straightforward ways to capitalize on affordable housing that municipalities are currently employing in BC and Canada? And the follow-up question to that is, what are some of the less obvious and more innovative ways to capitalize on these that are still feasible for most municipalities in BC?
Okay, so one of them, as I noted in my presentation, is offering up land for affordable housing, as we have done for the Small Sites Affordable Housing Project, is one tool that can help. And I think if New Westminster, which is 15.7 square kilometers and is the fifth most dense has the fifth highest population density in Canada, I think if we can do it, I think most municipalities can do it. Most municipalities have a lot more land than we do. Even some of the small, more rural ones would have more land. So this can be doable. Another way that works for municipalities in fast-growing, denser areas, say like Greater Vancouver, Greater Toronto, maybe Calgary, Edmonton, Kelowna, these type of communities, raising money for affordable housing through density bonus and community amenity contributions can help to create a pot of money that can be used to fund affordable housing projects later through grants and other means. And the other thing is municipalities do have control over zoning, so municipalities and our politicians can support rezonings and processes that would allow for an affordable housing project to be viable. So the densities, the setbacks, all those type of things that can sometimes hinder a project, allowing it to be a bit more flexible. And so another thing is in denser, faster growing areas, allowing affordable housing projects to have free additional density as opposed to strata projects that pay for density bonus, or reducing parking requirements can also help level the playing field. So these are some of the examples. And for other examples, I'd recommend going to CMHC and BC Housing websites. They have lots of case studies. They have examples of the different programs that you can use. I think Smart Growth BC published a really good guide about 10 years ago with some of the different programs that can be used.
Great, thanks for those examples. I'll jump to the chat box. There's a few short questions that have come in. The first one, Grace is asking, does the city have a strategy for dealing with NIMBYism in the rezoning process for potential projects?
Yes, we do. And I think a lot of it involves like genuine consultation and responding to people's concerns. I'll give the example of modular housing, because I think as many of us know, homelessness and providing housing for the homeless is probably one of the more controversial items, especially like in people's neighborhoods. And we did initially have a lot of opposition to this project. And what we did was we had an open house and we did a survey and we asked people what they like about the project and what they don't like. And then when we brought it back to the housing provider and we said, here are some of the concerns that they have listed, some of the things about, say, like safety, potential drug use, these type of things. And then we said we came up with a plan of how we're going to respond to it. And they actually did the project developer and the project the operator came up with a plan of how we're going to address some of these issues. So I think it's listening to the community and responding to their and incorporating their concerns into how you're going to deal with a project. I think that's really, really key. You have to listen to people And and once the community sees that you're listening to them and that you're going to mitigate some of the concerns that they have, some which are very real, then I think generally things become easier. And again, it depends by neighborhood. Like some neighborhoods are, they also see things like, say, in the downtown, we had some supportive housing come up about 10 years ago. And at that time, we had a lot of street homelessness. And I think the downtown, a lot of the folks start to realize, okay, we'd rather have people housed than on their street because they're going to be here regardless. And we might as well try to improve their lives and help make things better for them. And so I think, that, just responding to concerns, listening, and incorporating feedback is a good way to do it.
We have Elaine asking a question here as well. I'm not sure if she's referring to a specific initiative, but maybe you can speak more broadly or give an example. She asked, was there a local champion and who helped push this onto the agenda?
Well, the thing about housing is I think our council is very involved in housing, so they're champions on a lot of issues. I know when there's an issue that they can rate to personally, that often helps. If, for example, our family-friendly housing, our mayor has 3 young children, and he wanted to live in the downtown. He was looking for a condo that could fit his family, and it was very difficult. And I think having that personal experience and being able to relate to it can really help. I think a lot of our provincial and federal politicians also bring issues onto the map. Like the rent bank was started because people were coming into our MLA's office and they were saying, I'm going to be evicted. I'm strapped for cash. I don't have much money. Like I've had like a car accident or some divorce or something bad that's happened. And these we hear that. So we have a lot of from politicians. We also have a very engaged group of residents. We have residents associations that can bring issues to the fore. And so I think we just have a very involved community in general, from the residents to the politicians to staff. And we're very fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire had a question specifically about the rent bank. She's asking, what criteria do you use to determine whether a financial crisis is temporary?
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because I'm actually the member of the planning division who sits on the loan committee. And so our loan committee works basically, there's myself, there's someone from the credit union, from one of the local credit unions, and there's a community member, and then there's the rent bank coordinator. And we meet every Tuesday and we look over loan applications. And we have to make some very difficult decisions about who to approve. And one of the things we do is looking at bank statements and seeing over time, like, is this person continually mismanaging money? If they are, then the rent bank will not help them. And we often try to connect people to financial services. The other thing is looking at the nature of the crisis. If it's something like completely like out of their control, like they've suddenly had a health problem come up, or they've had a car accident or domestic violence or something, then there's reason to believe that it's temporary, because something like that can really put you in a hitch. It can make you miss work. It can make you have repair bills. It can make you be from having 2 people pay the rent to having 1 person. But if it's something where they've been late for paying rent like month after month after month, and it's happened like many different times, then the crisis wouldn't be temporary. It's complicated. Every case is like a snowflake. It's different.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. You have financial crises, but then you're also working in a context of sometimes very unaffordable housing. So even that baseline rent is often so high.
Yeah. Well, we don't use the 30% threshold. Like a lot of the people who apply are paying over 50% of their income on rent, and we just kind of accept it as a reality for unfortunately for low income folks that they often don't have many other options, especially if they're in crisis, than to pay more. And we're just trying to do our little bit to help them, and we and offering them information about other services such as the food bank. So maybe if they can cut some of their other costs, those really high housing costs can be manageable for them in the long term. And if they get some budgeting counseling and access to other potential financial supplements.
Yeah, supporting in other ways. And I guess it's not always, I guess sometimes the coordinator's working to support individuals and families to find more affordable housing, but I guess often not the case.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, like I said earlier, the housing wait list is very long, and it's very difficult to find. I mean, there are other options such as rent supplements from BC Housing, but again, there's a cutoff for that, and some people, if they're not deep low income, they might not qualify if they're like just on the borderline, and those people often have a very tough time if there's a crisis because they're not eligible for certain funding, but they're not well enough off financially to save up for a rainy day. The people on the cusp.
Jill had a follow-up question also related to the rent bank. She's asking, what is the success rate or repayment rate for the rent bank? So the percentage of people who pay back their loans.
Well, it's typically, there's different ways of measuring it. The one way of measuring it is the percentage of loans that are paid back. Another way of measuring it is the percentage of people who are paying back their loans. And I think it's about 60 something percent of the loan amount is being paid back. I mean, it's much lower than a typical bank. Like in a bank, you'd be looking in the 90s, and mortgages you'd be looking in the high 90s. But yeah, a lot of these people, we take on people who have challenging financial histories, and it makes it a challenge because honestly, it means that we will continually have to find ways to replenish our funds and look for sources of funding, unless the provincial government decides to fund all rent banks in British Columbia, which would be great if they did. Because yeah, like, you know, I think people have the best intentions to repay, but they don't always have the money to do it, and sometimes they'll have another crisis happen. Sometimes they'll pay it back 1 month and then they'll NSF like not sufficient funds the next month, and but I think most people do make a genuine effort to pay back, and there's a lot of the people who do pay it back. And we just take some of the losses as it is. Some places just give rent bank loans as grants where they're not expected to pay back. We're not in the financial position to do that, but I do know in Ontario that there are some that do that.
So shifting gears a little bit, we have a question from Nancy asking about inclusionary zoning. She's asking, how did you genuinely engage developers on inclusionary zoning? Which incentives do you use to make it work?
Well, it's a project that's on the horizon, so it's still kind of early days. We're still researching whether it's even a viable proposition in our expensive region. So when we do the consultation, we're going to engage UDI, which is the Urban Development Institute, and get feedback. In terms of incentives, we'd have to look at that. Obviously, allowing for higher density and lower parking would be something we've used with success for our secured market rental policy, and we'd probably have to extend that further. Like, it probably won't work at the levels of density that our current zoning entails. So yeah, it would have to be those type of incentives. And we find with developers that, you know, the things that matter the most to them are time, and we try our best to do things in a quick manner, but we're very busy. And the second thing would be, you know, density, being able to go higher, especially in this dense region, means a lot to developers. And lowering parking requirements. It's expensive to build parking, especially underground parking. So if we do consider incentives, if this project ends up being viable, then those would be some of the incentives we look at.
Jill's question touches on that density as well. She says, what's the difference between inclusionary zoning and garnishing money through density bonusing?
So what's the difference between that and density bonusing? Well, inclusionary housing is you'd think we'd hope it would create units on the ground, whereas with density bonusing, it often puts money into a pot, and then you have to use that money somewhere. But we'd hope with inclusionary housing that it would actually create units on the ground as mixed in with part of other projects. That's what the hope would be, instead of having a pot accumulate, which is very useful too, but then you have to find a place to use it and stuff. And sometimes that can be challenging. So that would be the main difference, I would think.
So we have about 10 more minutes for the question period. Feel free to keep sending those in. For now, I'm going to jump back to some of our questions that were asked beforehand. So going back to that one, Tristan, next question is, we are very new to developing the kind of ecosystem for social housing you have achieved in BC and Quebec, Alberta even. What hindsight advice do you have to lay the early ground, especially to get the credit unions on board?
Well, actually, BC's ecosystem was actually not especially conducive for new social housing up until about the past year or so. We weren't having much new housing being built. BC Housing is quite an involved and organized organization, which is good. But yeah, for a long time, the funding wasn't there, which is why it's like, with the federal government money and the provincial government, it's kind of like Christmas in BC in September now, finally, because we're actually being able to do stuff, which is awesome. I think the best thing to do is to make noise. I mean, the expression that I think it's the squeakiest wheel gets the most grease or something is important. Like, just hammer, like, what are you doing about housing? What are you doing? Send resolutions to your provincial government, join in advocacy campaigns, make yourself known, and get people involved, and that would probably be the best. I mean, yeah, people listen to and politicians listen to what people are talking about. So that's important. If you're a municipality, it's good to put your money in your land where your mouth is, so to speak. So if you can show you can bring resources to the table, such as land, that can help get projects done. In regards to stuff like credit unions and banks, we do have funding from our local credit unions for a rent bank program. And I think having someone on that credit union, be able to identify someone who's a champion for a particular issue or cares about that particular issue is key, because credit unions and banks have so many different things they're working on, so many different projects, that it's kind of hard to get someone to stand out. So you really need to get someone in there who really believes in something and has pull and can push for something.
So this next question is really interesting. Says, have you worked with the co-housing or hub residential models that both reduce loneliness and unit sizes?
New Westminster, we have not yet. We're open to co-housing, but we haven't yet worked with co-housing, and but we do, for our development process for new buildings, encourage common space and amenities that would encourage social interaction. But I do know, if you have questions about co-housing, I know that the City of Vancouver and the City of North Vancouver have some experience with this model, so they'd be good ones to ask.
Let's see, looks like the next question you've already answered as part of your presentation. Here's one, I'm not sure to what extent you can answer it because it's related to rural municipalities, but asking, what can rural municipalities do to retain or create affordable housing, or anything in the city that might be also applicable to a rural context?
Okay, well, rural municipalities are quite varied in British Columbia. They can range from small towns that have just lost a major employer, such as a sawmill, to resorts with very expensive high-end housing. So the solutions are different from community to community. One of the challenges rural municipalities have is they don't have the same level of staffing or finances to make some of the projects work. They also might not have the same development community that could do certain projects. However, there are affordable housing solutions that can work. Whistler is an example. In fact, I think there was an announcement today that they're going to be developing more workforce housing. And so they have a housing authority that develops workforce housing. And this is something for expensive resort communities might be quite popular. And another potential easy win for rural municipalities is to allow for secondary suites. There's still many municipalities. New Westminster's had secondary suites for decades, but there's many municipalities that don't. And this is so relatively affordable housing that's easy to create, because you don't need to get a sophisticated developer. You don't need to get provincial or federal funding. And it's a win-win, because this way owners have someone helping pay their mortgage and renters have rental stock. And many rural municipalities don't have purpose-built rentals. So that's one really easy win if the community's on board. But if you present it as something of, hey, as an owner, this can help you, and hey, as a renter, this can help you, then you're kind of covering everybody. I think municipalities can also offer up land for projects when the opportunities come in. And we have a lot of examples with this when the provincial government led the rapid response to homelessness modular housing projects. So we see modular housing projects under construction in smaller centers to to address homelessness such as Smithers, the Queen Charlotte Islands, Terrace, Prince Rupert, Port Alberni, and Sechelt. So my recommendation for rural municipalities is to contact BC Housing and CMHC to learn about the programs and opportunities that could work in their community, because they probably have some different funding or different things that could work for their particular context.
Really helpful examples, thank you. We have one more question that was asked before the webinar. How can we, this is a little specific, but how can we as the business community support affordable housing projects by faith organizations that are stalled in municipal bureaucracy?
Oh, okay. So I guess there's a few things that could be done. So business community has a voice too, so they can hold municipalities accountable for delay and put pressure on municipalities to advance the affordable housing projects. I'm not sure my colleagues would like me to say that, because we're quite busy as it is and stuff. But I think that that is one method that can work. And also, if the project is in danger of dying due to cost during a delay, the business community could step up and financially help support the project in the short term to help keep the project alive. They can make in-kind contributions to help with the financial gap, even if they can't give money. Like they could give, like if there's a construction company, they could maybe work on a Saturday to help, or maybe they could donate tools or something to help work on a site. Like there's lots of little things they can do. They can show up to rezonings and stuff and support the project. They can get people in the neighborhood to sign on and support the project. They can do a lot with their voice and with their resources.
Have one last question. That's just a more specific question going back to the rent bank. And if anyone else has questions, please put them into the chat box in the next minute or so, because otherwise this will be the last one. Just a quick question on whether guarantee schemes have been tried to backstop the rent bank loans.
Well, one thing we do to try to make the repayment rate higher is if the clients are on income assistance, we get the rent bank loan repayment each month taken directly out of their income assistance check. We make arrangements with the government of BC to do that, and that can help. So that's one thing we do.
Great. So I don't see any more questions coming through. Thank you so much, Tristan. That was a lot of questions to get through. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and your expertise on all these housing issues. I will send in the follow-up email, we'll link to the City of New Westminster's housing webpage. We have a New Westminster case study that also summarizes some of the initiatives, and we'll share the webinar recording and the PowerPoint slides with everybody. So that brings us to the end of this discussion. Thank you as well to everyone who attended the webinar today and for the thoughtful questions that you asked. I'm just going to close with a few closing announcements. So first, stay in touch with vibrant communities, cities reducing poverty. Receive the latest thinking, news, tools, and resources from the Poverty Reduction Network by subscribing to our bi-monthly newsletter. You can also visit the online learning community for poverty reduction practitioners at tamarackcommunity.ca/cities reducing poverty. An upcoming event, there's only a few days left to register for the Community Change Festival. Over 4 days, participants will explore the 5 competencies every changemaker needs to move from ideas to practice to impact. Collective impact, community engagement, community innovation, collaborative leadership, and evaluating impact. We'll host workshops, open space dialogue, present tools, take you on immersive tours, facilitate peer input processes, and much more. You can find the register using the link on the screen, and that will be sent to you in the follow-up minutes. Last, we have Tamarack Institute has recently launched an evaluation and design evaluation systems change workshop that runs from November 13th to 14th in Calgary, Alberta. You can join Mark Kabaj and Galen McLuskey as they explore one of the most critical challenges in today's evaluation landscape, designing evaluations for systems change. Again, register using the link on the screen that will be sent to you. So in a few days, you'll receive the follow-up email that, like I said, will include a link to the audio recording of the call, as well as the learning opportunities mentioned previously. You can email me directly at allison@tamarackcommunity.ca to provide feedback on today's webinar. We're always trying to improve on your experience. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.